Soundgarden frontman Chris Cornell was a rock legend who inspired both his audiences and the musicians he worked with. Here's what some of his peers have had to say about him. Just 2 months after Chris Cornell's passing, the world lost another rock icon when Linkin Park frontman Chester Bennington died on July 20, 2017. Bennington was a close personal friend of Cornell since the late 2000s, when Cornell, then performing as a solo artist, was part of the 5th iteration of Linkin Park's Project Revolution tour. In a 2008 interview with the Orange County Register, Bennington gushed about how Cornell was one of his primary influences as a singer and opened up about how they had really hit it off while performing tour dates. He told the publication, "Fortunately, Chris is an amazing guy. We've become really good friends. I go up on stage every night with him and perform Temple of the Dog's Hunger Strike, and he comes out during our set and performs Crawling with us, and the crowd just flips out."
I've been a huge fan of Chris, and to be able to do this is we're blessed.
Immediately following Cornell's death in 2017, Bennington took to social media and posted a letter to his late friend, expressing his grief and thanking the Soundgarden frontman for being such an inspiration to him. The letter read in part, "Your talent was pure and unrivaled. Your voice was joy and pain, anger and forgiveness, love and heartache all wrapped up into one. I suppose that's what we all are. You helped me understand that." Matt Cameron is one of the few musicians who can say they've been part of 2 bands in grunge's Big Four. The Soundgarden and Pearl Jam drummer is also a 4-decade-plus veteran of the Seattle rock scene, and that's given him some vivid memories of working with Chris Cornell during the former band's early years. In an interview collated by Loudwire, Cameron talked about how Cornell evolved as a performer from his earliest days, when he barely interacted with audiences, telling the publication, "The way that he would perform back then, he sort of went into this trance. When I would watch those guys before I joined, I was just really mesmerized by the way Chris would just sort of turn into this shaman kind of dude. Eventually, he became more comfortable with an audience, and I think he was naturally a really shy person, believe it or not." That wasn't Cameron's only interesting anecdote about Cornell's pre-fame years. In the liner notes to Cornell's self-titled, posthumously released 2018 compilation album, Cameron also remembered how blown away he was when the frontman was recording vocals for Soundgarden's Ugly Truth from the 1989 album Louder Than Love. He wrote, "The rough recording encompassed a musical universe so vast and pure, I couldn't believe my ears. I listened to it over and over, pinching myself wondering if I was in a dream or if I was finally in the band of my dreams. Luckily for me, it wasn't a dream." Chris Cornell's death hit particularly hard for Pearl Jam's Eddie Vedder, who opened up about his friend's passing in a November 2020 interview on The Howard Stern Show. Vedder explained that Cornell's death especially affected him as it came soon after his younger half-brother died in a climbing accident in Africa.
"I still haven't quite dealt with it."
While obviously still struggling to process Cornell's death more than 3 years after the fact, Vedder also shared some fond memories of his friendship with his fellow grunge icon.
I would hang out with him outside of the band more than, even the other band guys, and I didn't know that many people in Seattle.
Out of all his bandmates, Soundgarden guitarist Kim Thayil probably has the most to say about Chris Cornell's evolution as a musician. Speaking to Kerrang in 2021, Thayil noted that Cornell originally pulled double duty on drums and vocals, and while he was unquestionably skilled at both, his bandmates felt it might be better to hire a dedicated frontman. Thayil told the publication, "We were writing songs in odd time signatures, so it became tougher for Chris to sing and play drums at the same time. Original Soundgarden bassist Hiro Yamamoto and I decided we needed a singer. We thought Chris was a bit conventional in his approach, but as a drummer and a songwriter, he was much more inventive." Ultimately, Cornell's desire to make his mark as a lead singer won over, and he would move to the front of the stage while remaining Soundgarden's chief songwriter. As Thayil recalled in a separate interview, Cornell was initially self-conscious in this latter role, but Mother Love Bone's late frontman Andrew Wood inspired him to become more productive and confident when writing songs. When Soundgarden was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2025, Thayil told Billboard that it was thanks to Cornell that the band learned to appreciate the importance of such an honor, saying in the interview, "He's the one who convinced me how appreciative the fans and our peers and the Soundgarden community, that includes the people that we work with and work for us, would be about it." Slipknot frontman Corey Taylor might be frank and opinionated, but his heart is often in the right place, as it was when he took aim at fans who felt Chris Cornell and Chester Bennington did something cowardly by dying by suicide. Taylor told Loudwire, Calling them cowards is a very immature way of looking at it. It's the easy way to look at something like that because it makes you not have to face what a serious issue it is. It's easy for someone to label it like that so they can turn their back on it and pretend that it was something that didn't happen to them when inside they're hurting. People who fight depression are almost in a constant state of hurting. Aside from that fan call-out, Taylor had more to say about Cornell in another Loudwire interview, this time praising the singer for not putting any boundaries on the type of music he can make.
If he wanted to try a genre, he'd do it. I mean, he was completely fearless.
Ben Shepherd hasn't revealed too many stories about his time making music with Chris Cornell and Soundgarden, but on the 8th anniversary of the singer's death in May 2025, the bassist took to the band's Instagram. In his post, Shepherd remembered Cornell as a forgiving person who understood what his friends and colleagues may have been going through. He wrote, "It's at this point of recording all of our previous albums, I'd get this overwhelming hit of awe, camaraderie, power of creativity, majesty even, and love from the music, and my bandmates, and I guess just pure life force." The bassist went on to share more positive memories of Cornell's tenure with Soundgarden, mainly the joy they felt at having the chance to record albums and live out their rock and roll fantasies, writing, "Chris and I used to get giddy like little kids and laugh together in the studio at least once each time recording a record. Wow, we get to do this, can you believe it? We get to record." Though best remembered for his time with Soundgarden, Chris Cornell also achieved great success with Audioslave, a supergroup that also consisted of 3/4 of Rage Against the Machine, guitarist Tom Morello, bassist Tim Comerford, and drummer Brad Wilk. While they only released 3 albums across their career, songs such as Like a Stone remain fondly remembered by rock fans, with that track showing a more sensitive but nonetheless hard-hitting side of the legendary singer. Years later, Morello singled out Like a Stone as a classic example of Cornell's brilliance as a songwriter. He told Loud TV, "The first time that we were writing it, he sang not the words, but sang the melody that you hear on the record, and I played the solo that you hear on the record. So it was one of those songs that it felt like it was almost unearthed in a way."
And we just tapped into something that was very soulful.
Morello also spoke candidly about Cornell's addiction issues, telling Metal Hammer in 2024 that it took some time for Audioslave to realize he was dealing with such personal demons. He added that Cornell's time with the supergroup gave him some much-needed support. He said in the interview, "I believe that the good fortune of all us having met bought him 16 more years. That band was so liberating, it really felt like the horizon was completely open. And you know what? Standing on stage with Chris Cornell beside you is pretty great." System of a Down frontman Serj Tankian was one of the last notable musicians Chris Cornell worked closely with in the final months of his life. The singer told Rolling Stone that the two men developed a tighter bond when they were recording songs for The Promise, a 2016 movie set against the backdrop of the Armenian genocide. Cornell's track, also titled The Promise, turned out to be the last song he ever released before his passing. As an Armenian-American musician whose work with System of a Down oftentimes referenced the genocide, Tankian was very impressed by Cornell's composition. He told Rolling Stone, "I loved it. I told him, it's really emotional and you're bringing everything out." He made a great connection in the song. The most important thing to realize about the Armenian genocide is not just what happened 100 years ago, but how it's relevant today, because that shit's happening now. That's what he did with the song. He made that connection. I was really grateful for that. More recently, Tankian looked back on some of the final conversations he had with Cornell during an appearance on the YouTube show Last Meals. He recalled advising Cornell to experiment with an orchestra section in future recordings, also revealing that his friend was considering releasing an album of covers.
He had a lot of plans, which is why I can't understand, right?
Nirvana drummer and Foo Fighters singer-guitarist Dave Grohl is yet another musician who knew Chris Cornell from way back in the day. Speaking to Rolling Stone, Grohl looked back on his early impressions of the Soundgarden frontman, whose soft-spoken offstage nature contrasted with his explosive onstage persona. He said in the interview, "There was a bunch of the Seattle gang there, and Chris just seemed so quiet and mellow compared to the rest of the Maniacs." In an interview on the radio show Morning Rumble, Grohl, this time joined by the Foo Fighters then drummer Taylor Hawkins, looked back again on Cornell's reputation as a stand-up guy who overflowed with talent. He told the host, "He was the sweetest person. He was so talented. He had so much to offer that it was a real shock to hear that he had gone. I think that mental health and depression is something people should really take seriously. There's a stigma attached to it that's unfortunate." Hawkins, whose death in March 2022 was another crushing blow to the rock scene, chimed in with his own thoughts on Cornell's passing. The drummer said, "Not to get to hear Chris Cornell make another record again. That's my selfish version of it. There's such a bigger hurt beyond my own selfish. I barely knew him, a little bit, but what I did know, he was super cool. We just loved his records, man."